History of the disaster. Hurricane Ian made landfall in southwest Florida late September 2022. It will forever be remembered as one of the worst storms to hit our area. It was the first Category 4 storm to hit since Hurricane Charlie in 2004. Similar to Charlie, Ian was supposed to hit Tampa, but at the last minute turned to Lee County. The catastrophic waves, winds, tidal storm surges brought by Hurricane Ian were devastating to the entire southwest Florida, claiming over 150 lives and causing over $112 billion in damages. This amount of damage made Hurricane Ian the costliest storm in Florida's history and the third costliest storm in the country. It would take years to rebuild and recover the most devastated areas. In addition to the 12 hours of pounding winds, the storm surge came in on the coastal areas 12 to 15 feet tall, flooding up to the second-story level of buildings along the coastline. People living in South Cape Coral and other locations right off the Caloosahatchee River experienced up to 4 feet of water inside their homes from storm surge flowing up the river and into the extensive network of the canals. The aftermath of the disaster was incredible. Debris filled every single street. People's houses were flooded, de-roofed, or otherwise damaged. Large dual-dump disaster recovery trucks with grapples would go around the streets for months following the storm, picking up piles and piles of debris and carrying it off to dumping sites. Mobile morgues were brought in to handle the magnitude of bodies. Many washed out to the ocean and then washed back up onto the shore. Due to the flooding in one of the main local hospitals, patients had to be evacuated to hospitals in neighboring counties. They were taken by ambulance transport until the highway bridge gave out. Bridges washed out to the barrier islands with no way of transporting supplies or performing rescue to those locations except by boat or helicopters. Electricity was another major undertaking. Governor DeSantis organized teams of line workers to come in from other states by the thousands to help repair the lines and restore power. Even so, it took up to 2 weeks for many people to receive power back again. However, given the extent of the damage, this was actually a remarkable quick turnaround. Hurricane Ian was a true devastation to the communities it affected, and recovery from losses are still ongoing years later. Many losses will never be recouped, especially the loss of life. Many people were permanently displaced from their homes, and insurance payouts were slow to come, or never came at all. Some chose to just sell the property that was left, especially on the coastal areas, to developers as opposed to attempting to rebuild. This disastrous event caused much upheaval, relocation, and devastation to the communities of Southwest Florida. Related hazards. References. Seek feedback. Reflect on performance. Explore new techniques. Set personal goals. Iterate and adapt. Consistent rehearsal. Strengthen your familiarity. Refine delivery style. Pacing, tone, and emphasis. Timing and transitions. Aim for seamless and professional delivery. Practice audience. Enlist colleagues to listen and provide feedback. It was not only just the wind and water causing damage and danger from the hurricane, but there were several secondary dangerous effects during and that followed in the aftermath of the storm. Hurricane Ian caused a massive chain reaction of events that required continuous accommodation, resourcefulness, and troubleshooting skills to manage. These challenges were met head-on by everyone from the upper levels of the government down to the citizens in their homes and neighborhoods. Notable secondary hazards included use of generators. Improper generator use and lack of education on the topic is a hazard after major storms where the power is lost. and people are running off generators for extended periods of time. Electrical or other fires were another hazard. Many electrical vehicles spontaneously burst into flames in people's garages with saltwater storm surge. Down power lines, although the power company specifically turned the power off at certain points during the storm to avoid the risk of live wires on the ground until they could be repaired and cleared. Lack of electricity in general was a hazard to many people, especially those with infants or anyone with significant medical conditions. In the same way, the scarcity of gas was initially a hazard, as people were relying on gas to fuel their generators. The integrity of the bridges over bodies of water. Two main access bridges washed out in the hurricane, one being the only land access out to Pond Island, and the other being a bridge via the interstate. This greatly impeded the flow of supplies to these areas, as well as the emergency and other rescues that needed to take place. Looting is a hazard that comes as a potential with any major storm. Given certain demographics of an area, it may be more troublesome in some areas versus others. As South Florida strongly supports gun ownership, fortunately, looting was not to the degree one might see in other areas less inclined to stay armed. A bacteria called Vibrio vulniceus caused hazardous and even deadly effects. This bacteria, also called flesh-eating bacteria, was present in the Gulf waters after the storm as a result of so many washed out and decaying bodies. There were many serious cases and even loss of limbs and life from this dangerous bacteria in the aftermath of the storm. Another hazard that continued on for many more months was sharp debris in the waters. Between debris in the water and bacteria in the water, it was advised not to swim at the beach for quite some time. Mold and mildew damage, which is linked to many chronic illnesses, was a risk factor for many people whose houses flooded, particularly those who were present at the time of the storm and able to get back right away to clean out their house. Mold and mildew remediation is essential in these cases, but the risk of untreated or missed mold was a definite possibility for many people until they were able to complete the remediation. All of the above issues are hazards brought about by secondary effects, weaknesses, and liabilities after the storm. Roles of local, state, regional, and national agencies. Response efforts came from several agencies. Some of those agencies were local, state, regional, and national agencies. At the local level, one of the main roles was communicating to their community. Unfortunately, hurricanes do occur in our community often. Due to that, some community members did not take this storm seriously. Our local leaders in the days prior to the storm communicated all information about possible landfall and the need for people to evacuate. Once Hurricane Ian made landfall and passed through our area, we saw an immediate response from our local incident management team. The initial response consisted of surveying the area to see what they were dealing with post-storm. 911 lines had over 1,300 calls pending once roadways were deemed safe for emergency services to move throughout the county. As they started our local recovery efforts, they quickly discovered that additional resources were going to be needed at the state level. The County Emergency Operations Center did an amazing job with communicating with the state officials as to what type of response and assistance they were going to need. One of the first things that the state of Florida assisted with was the severe damage that our roadways and bridges experienced. We had two bridges collapse/wash away due to Hurricane Ian. One was a section of the Sanibel Causeway and the other was the roadway to Pine Island and Mount Lachey. The state of Florida had done some thorough pre-planning and had contracts in place with companies that could assist with fixing these roadways as soon as possible. We needed to get these roadways fixed so that we could get to those people on our barrier islands and assess the damage to that area. Our local and state officials coordinated the work on Mount Lachey and Sanibel in less than 3 days to repair the roadways and begin helping the people on those islands. Due to the severity of the repairs that were needed on those roadways, we also saw assistance from the national agency, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They also assisted in certifying that the roadway was safe for emergency response personnel to travel on the roadway. FEMA also played a huge role in the response efforts during Hurricane Ian. Two of our healthcare facilities lost the capability of running water to their fire suppression system due to the county-wide water main break. This caused the immediate evacuation of these facilities. Those evacuations were coordinated with healthcare agencies across the state of Florida, as well as FEMA personnel. Both hospitals were in areas of our community that saw serious impact from Hurricane Ian. Once the county fixed the water main breaks, we were able to get those hospitals back online. There were people that needed some sort of emergency attention caused a backlog in getting help to everyone that needed it. FEMA provided 4 disaster medical assistance teams. One team responded to each of the hospitals in our county to help with the abundance of citizens that were coming into our emergency rooms to seek help. The state of Florida also has standing memoranda of understanding with several electric line companies to respond to our area post-storm. These response teams typically stage in areas of our state that will not see immediate impacts and are nearby so that they can respond to our area as soon as possible. We also saw national assistance from the National Guard. They assisted with keeping everything in order and preventing potential looting in our area. The National Guard also assisted hospital personnel with crowd control at their DMATs, as well as assisting people coming into the emergency rooms. Theories of disaster related to Hurricane Ian. Normative theories were enacted in the days leading up to Hurricane Ian's arrival. These theories were utilized based off of experiential planning from past storms and included activation of emergency response teams, the Incident Command Center, and other emergency resources. Public education was also distributed throughout social media and regular media, informing people of safety measures to take and essential supplies to stock up on in preparation. On a higher level, the governor issued a state of emergency for areas that may be most affected, and he had teams on standby to come in right away during the aftermath for cleanup and to restore power and other essential functions. Substantive theories are utilized within authoritative agencies to try to predict the community's response to different situations. In the situation of a major hurricane, there is past data to examine to determine likely future reactions, and we can see how this was used in Hurricane Ian. One of the first things people panic over with major storms is stocking up on gas, and extra gas was brought in over the days before the hurricane to help alleviate any shortages leading up to the storm. After major storms, there is a predictability, looting, and crime taking place as criminals prey on the situation and people in their most vulnerable state. For this reason, curfews were put into place at night to help prevent illicit activities. Ebronic theories were utilized as processes related to the preparation and planning ahead of time, as well as the implementation during and after were carried out. A type of roadmap is used in explanation of how many things are expected to play out, what resources will be required, and what must be done to achieve the outcomes necessary to restore the community after the storm has passed. Granted, there are always going to be unexpected occurrences as well that must be dealt with, but there are also scenarios that are given, such as power loss, with power lines down, inaccessible roads with debris, and etc. These scenarios are anticipated and planned can be made to mitigate the problems and provide necessary resources. Causes, consequences, terminology, taxonomy, and Hurricane Ian. Hurricane Ian made landfall in southwest Florida as a Category 4 storm with sustained winds of 155 miles per hour. First developed out in the Atlantic Ocean and proceeded to move westward into the Caribbean. Interacted with Hurricane Fiona while out in the Atlantic, which was already a Category 4 hurricane. The wind shear slowed down its development, but as it made its way into the central Caribbean, it interacted with sea surface temperatures which were 1 to 2 degrees Celsius higher than average, and that aided in the development of an even stronger storm. After interacting with the higher sea surface temperatures, the hurricane rapidly intensified, developing into a Category 4 storm within 24 hours. As it made its way towards southwest Florida, it underwent an eyewall replacement and continued to move slowly towards land. In addition to the wind strength, Ian was also massive in overall size, engulfing the entire lower state. The eyewall itself was 34 miles in diameter. Made landfall still as a very slow-moving storm and swept over southwest Florida over the course of about 12 long hours. Storm surge was devastating for the coastal areas and barrier islands, reaching over 13 feet in some areas, completely engulfing buildings and houses, even washing them out completely out to sea. Hurricane Ian was the fourth largest storm to hit the United States. From the recorded history, Hurricane Ian is the ninth hurricane to hit Lee County, with a reported death toll of allegedly 161. It was the fourth deadliest storm to hit the United States. In addition to the winds and storm surge, Ian brought a lot of rainfall as well. Some areas received up to 29 inches of rain, but the areas of direct impact from the hurricane itself received less. There were also 15 tornadoes as a result of the hurricane, 14 of which were located in Florida. Hurricane Ian was estimated to have caused $113.9 billion of damage. The cost of rebuilding was too much for many people, and they had to lose their homes or sell at a loss when they were unable to afford what would need to be done to restore them. Many had to be completely demolished and rebuilt from the ground up, and others, as mentioned before, were leveled or washed completely out to sea. The insurance battles then began, and as many insurance companies refused to pay out amounts that were needed to rebuild or gave less than sufficient funds. In addition, homeowners' insurance rates spiked after the storm, causing many people to be unable to afford their house payments and forced to move for that reason. Hurricane Ian impacted the lives of everyone in the hardest hit areas. In one way or another, no one was spared. It became a branded hardship, though, as the community pulled together with slogans such as Ian Strong, branded merchandise, and used it as a way to keep the community strong and raise funds for restoration for those in the most in need. Donations were sent in from around the country, as well as volunteers. Local companies did what they could to pitch in, including one construction company's rebuilding the only bridge out to the barrier islands so they could have access to resources and aid. Hurricane Ian definitely left a mark on southwest Florida, but resilience is showing as rebuilding continues on. Risk, vulnerability, resiliency, and risk communication. Florida as a whole identified several areas of risk and vulnerability after assessing the damage and situations brought by Hurricane Ian. One of those was the amount of mobile homes constructed before 1994. In the path of a major hurricane, those homes just crumble, and Florida has many areas that meet this criterion. Since Florida is a retirement state for many people and a place for second homes, it is not uncommon for Northerners to have a mobile home in one of the many retirement communities across the state. There are now a target of inspection for hurricane risk and opportunity for remediation. On the same note, much of Florida's coastal populations are more elderly and therefore more vulnerable to the impacts and fallouts from major hurricanes. After everything settled after Ian passed over, it was noted that those who were older were disproportionately affected, as they are often more reliant on electricity as well as having decreased ability to withstand harsh and extreme conditions. Of the fatalities that occurred with Hurricane Ian, most of them were over the age of 50. Another area of risk that is impactful to many people in Florida is that so much of the coastal cities of Florida are in a flood zone. These flood zones are designated on a scale by level of risk and are required to carry flood insurance if the house is mortgaged, but that still involves risk even if the home is insured. Many houses in the flood zones did experience flooding during Hurricane Ian, even if they are not directly on the water. Risk communication was a vital aspect of the impact from hurricane. There was much backlash given to local forecasting and authorities regarding evacuation requirements. As with what happened with Hurricane Charlie back in '04, Hurricane Ian was expected to impact and make landfall in the Tampa Bay area, 2 hours north. However, Lee County was always in the cone of uncertainty, where hazardous conditions or an altogether change of plans could very likely occur. Unfortunately, this was misunderstood by many people, and when evacuation orders came out for areas of Lee County just prior to the storm's landfall, many people deemed it to be too late to try to evacuate or not worth the effort at that point. As a result, there was much more loss of life than otherwise may have occurred, and it could have been avoided. Over the last decade, there have already been continuing efforts put forth by the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program as a way to design and improve on storm predictions and accuracy of forecasts and risks. These efforts continue, especially after the massive devastation which occurred from Hurricane Ian. As rebuilding takes place from Hurricane Ian, many new changes are implemented, both with local rebuilding codes and also directly from FEMA, with relocation to the flooding zones. Older houses are required to be brought up to current elevation codes. While not mandatory, many people are opting to replace their new planning strategies for emergency management. After Hurricane Ian, many emergency managers asked questions such as, what could we have done differently? They were also asked, what did you learn from this disaster? We can always rehash every decision made during Hurricane Ian and say we should have done this or that differently. Going forward, the mindset that everyone needs to have, regardless of their role in incident management, is that every storm is different. Yes, this may not be their first storm, but every storm has something different that you must prepare for. We always heard about the precautions of storm surge in our area, but we never experienced the storm surge that Hurricane Ian caused. Planning is essential for every disaster event. If you stay ready, you do not have as much to do to get ready. Hurricane Ian taught us that we must take every potential threat seriously and to not put 100% faith in the forecast cone. Many folks saw that we were on the edge of the cone and did not take the storm seriously. Many said, it's going to Tampa or it's going to land south of us. Well, we were in the cone most of the time, but if you paid attention to the storm surge warnings, you would see that the track from the beginning was not going to be in our favor. As we got closer to landfall, it was imminent that we were going to see severe impact from the storm. Many did not consider the storm surge impact, and because of that, were not prepared for what was about to happen. We saw storm surge up to 15 feet in some areas, which completely devastated many areas of our county. Can you prepare for something like that? In my opinion, it's a yes and no answer. Yes, you can prepare for that by choosing to safely evacuate the area. No, you cannot prepare for storm surge, as it can be very hard to predict the exact amount of impact. What you need to prepare for is the decision to evacuate. Many emergency managers are now taking steps to train for potential storm surge like this in the future. Not only did we lose power in our community, but we also lost running water due to the water main break. Cell towers in our area were completely wiped out and caused people to be unable to communicate with their loved ones. Training for these scenarios in the future can better prepare you for them going forward. Having a plan in place that can be initiated when one of these scenarios is discovered. One huge lesson we learned was that there is so much that runs on the basis that you need running water. During Hurricane Ian, we had a major water line break. The county did not know where exactly the break was, so they had to completely shut their system down until they could discover where the break was. For our healthcare system, we needed running water for the fire suppression system. Since much of our area did not have a running water source, it caused two of our hospitals to evacuate. You may be asking yourself, how can we prepare for that scenario of no running water? How can we keep our critical infrastructure alive? Well, we had one hospital that was very old. The facility had an on-site well system. This allowed that facility to focus their water on the fire suppression system and not have to evacuate their facility. Post-storm, I have talked with many Florida healthcare facilities that have one huge takeaway they took was the benefit of having our own well system. The fact that you're not dependent on the county for your water source was huge. Planning for this in the future is important. Some may not be able to drill their own well system, so they have decided to contract with the city and county officials for their own water main line to their healthcare facility. This allows for a dedicated source in the event of an issue. Lastly, preparing for something like this is very hard to predict, but you can be ready for this. Training for disaster events is an absolute must-do. Training for what-ifs and potential issues that may arise will keep your teams prepared. If you think this will never happen, you are wrong. Add into your training scenario and prepare yourself for it in case it does happen. The crazier your training scenario can be, the better you will be prepared going forward. Always remember to stay ready so you don't have to get ready.